this is Robin with Creative2xmom, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the books we read in the month of October. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And today I'm sharing with you a video all about the books that I read in the month of October, as well as the read-alouds that we did with our kiddos, giving you a little bit of a wrap-up of the books that I read, what I thought about them, were they good, were they not so good, and I always like to include the things that we are reading in our homeschool. It's become quite a way of life for us to always have a read-aloud with our kids, and we have really read some great books over the years. So my stack is a little bit small this month, and that is because several were on my Kindle, and I will insert pictures as I share those with you. But the first one was a physical book that I had to return to the library. That's my number one tip. Always check your library. The first book that I read in October was You Will Get Through This by MacLeod. So this is a book that follows the life of Joseph from Genesis, and it takes the life lessons that he learned from being the favorite son, to being sold into slavery, to working in Potiphar's house, to going to jail, and then rising to power in Egypt and being confronted with his past. It takes many of the things that he learned and applies them to our own lives as we're going through rough patches. And I will say, when you start to look at Joseph's life, if you think about everything that he went through, all of the valleys that he encountered and all of the character issues that he had to work through, there is so much to be learned just from his life in the Bible. And Lucado does a really great job of talking about how sometimes the valleys that we're in are not of our own making. Sometimes they're life circumstances. Sometimes they're consequences of someone else's actions, and how easy it is to become bitter and frustrated because you're paying the price for something that someone else did. And that even happened in Joseph's life, how he had seasons where he was paying the price because of somebody else's choices. I was reading this book at a time in my life where I was kind of dealing with some personal things as well, and I have to say that this book really took me to a deeper place in my relationship with the Lord, a deeper understanding of what those valleys are about and how they can be used in my life, whether it's of my own making or not. This is, I think, the second time that I've read through this book, but it's been several years since the first time, and it just hit me afresh and in a different way than it did before. Very universal truths, very universal application on this one. The next nonfiction book that I read in the month of October was called Unbreakable. Now this is written to the middle school set, but I would say even your high schoolers and even me as an adult, I learned so much from this book about the events that led up to World War II, how there was already code breaking happening before a lot of those events transpired, and a lot of the unknown men and women who made this possible. This was a great look into some history that I never even thought about. It wasn't that I was never taught this so much as I never would have even thought to look into this and how did they break these codes. It was really interesting. It was a little bit hard at times to follow because there were so many people introduced in this book. I felt like I would have liked to have had my own personal key going on at the same time just to track everybody and where they were. There was a lot of people involved in this operation. Very extensive, very interesting read. I will link my full review down below because this was a review book, but I wouldn't limit this just to the middle school set. In fact, I'm thinking about my 6th grader, and I think he would be a little overwhelmed with it. Possibly 8th grade would be okay, but I would actually categorize this one in the high school, and I feel like a lot of adults could learn from this one as well. So let's talk nonfiction. Oh, I love me a good nonfiction book. This month I had 2 review books in the nonfiction category, as well as one that I was pre-reading for one of my kiddos. So the first title is An Amish Christmas Star. Now, like I said, this was a review book, and it was a set of 3 novellas centered around the Christmas season. Typically, I don't really like novellas because the story is so fast that it's hard to get into. But I really liked the first one and the last one in this series. The middle one, not so much. One of the characters was a little, I think they were trying to make her endearing. They were trying to make her young and light and naive and just happy, but she came across kind of spoiled. So that one was not my favorite. The first story was really good because you follow the story of a man and a woman who are trying to travel home for the holidays under different family circumstances. One is joyful, one is very tragic. And you start to see their relationship, of course, develop throughout this whole journey. But you get it was pretty humorous. It was very humorous for a short little novella. The last one was just a sweet family story of a couple working out their relationship and working out life circumstances that was forcing them to be apart for a season, and how they learned to navigate that within their marriage. I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. I will link my full review down below. I don't know. Like I said, there was 2 that I liked and 1 that I wasn't so much sold on, so I will leave that for you to decide what's worth it. The next fiction book I read was called The Orchard by Beverly Lewis. So this book follows the story of 2 twins, a boy and a girl, who are very close. They've both grown up on the family property and helped with the family business, which is this orchard that has been in the family for several generations. And both of them dream of working on this orchard into their adulthood. However, this story is written during the time of the Vietnam War, and the son is drafted. Now, Amish are pacifists, so typically they would ask for an exemption in a case like this, but the son had a friend who was drafted, went off to war, and never returned home. And you start to see the inner turmoil that is happening in his heart, where he agrees that he is not going to avoid the draft, and he is actually goes into the military. So that leaves a lot of questions in this family as to why this son is going against tradition, why he is in a lot of ways shunning who he is as an Amish son. He's shunning this family, he's shunning picking up the family business, and it brings into question what the future holds. So not only what does the future hold, but how do you as a parent or as a sibling start to reconcile that relationship, because you have someone that you love very, very deeply and is going against so much of what you believe. This book is written from 2 perspectives, both the father and the sister, so the chapters will alternate. You get a little bit of an insight into what the son is feeling, but that comes from outside characters. It's more focused on these 2. Typically, Lewis's books are a little bit formulaic and predictable, but the setting of this one is really what kept it interesting and engaging, because what do you do in a time of war? What do you do when you see people dying, and how do you reconcile that with your beliefs? I will leave my full written review down below, but I will say this is probably one of the better titles that I've read by Beverly Lewis in the past several years. And just like I said, the setting keeps it really interesting and keeps it a little bit more engaging. The last fiction book that I read personally was The Good Master. This is by Kate Sarity. You may know this author from Singing Tree or The White Stag. This is the first book I have ever read by this author. And I was doing it as a pre-read. It was included in Sunlight's World History for high school. And so I sometimes will pull their books so that I get a little bit of a glimpse into what my kids are reading instead of just handing off everything. And I wanted to read this one because it is set in the Hungarian countryside about 1900. You get a good glimpse into everyday life of the everyday person. There's a lot of good character qualities that are being promoted in this book. I will say, as far as action goes, there's a little bit of action in the beginning and then it kind of levels off. You get these sort of everyday scenes from each chapter following this boy and girl and how their relationship develops, their cousins. Very sweet story, but the biggest benefit in this book for me was the attributes of this young man and young woman. Are they perfect? No. They're growing, they're young, they get into trouble, they do things they shouldn't do, but their heart is in the right place, and it's in a place of wanting to honor the family. Books like this are really hard to come by in that respect, and that's the sort of thing that I want my kids to see being held up before them. So in that respect, I love this book. I will say I would not count this as a high school reading level. Maybe for the history aspect, but definitely not for the reading. 7th grade, maybe 8th grade, but not high school. So I'm not really sure what to do with that as far as applying it to curriculum, but as far as just having a good book to read, I would hand this one off to my middle schooler. So let's talk family read-alouds. We've been doing read-alouds for so long, it has just become part of our family culture, but I always sort of categorize them as part of our homeschool. The first book that we read, I've already returned to the library, so I can't show it to you, but it was The Sword and the Stone. Now, I included this one this year because we are doing medieval history, because it falls right into that. We have Merlin the Wizard, who has been hired to educate these 2 boys, and Kay is going to become a knight because he's the oldest son, and under him we have the Wart, who will be his page. And we don't really know a lot about Wart's history. We don't really know where he's come from, but we do learn a lot about him and his curiosity and his imagination and his thirst for adventure. So it's a cute little glimpse into court life. It's a glimpse into what it would be to become a knight and what that education looked like. And yet it is this fun science fiction, fantasy, what have you, where they're going on these adventures. It took me a little while to get into it. Probably about 8 chapters I started to get into the rhythm because the language is challenging. And it is a fantasy, so it took me a little while to get into the humor of that. My 6th grade son loved it. After I got into the book a little bit, I actually really loved it and would read it again. My 9th grade daughter, not so much. She's a little bit more literal than that. So if you have a child that doesn't like science fiction, I would skip this one. But if you're studying medieval history, it is a really fun read. After that, we picked up The Mouse with the Question Mark Tail by Richard Peck. This is a quick read. I would say 15 chapters, but we were flying through it because it is a lot of fun. I've read a few titles by this author before. I know we've read Secrets at Sea, which was a cute one with the kids. So this is the story of a mouse, and he was abandoned. They found him with his eyes closed, and he was raised by Aunt Marigold. Now he is in the sort of like the underground tunnels from Buckingham Palace during Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. And so he is trying to make his way to her because he's heard that, number 1, she can speak to him, and number 2, she could possibly tell him who he is and find out his history, and that's what he wants. He's been bullied his whole life, he's been teased, he doesn't even really have a name, and so he wants to find out who he is. Cute book. So much fun to see the world through the eyes of a mouse and the perils, the world that he comes from. This author is very imaginative and a lot of fun to read. So what's coming up next? What's a glimpse into November? Well, for me personally, I am reading Giving Your Words by Sally Clarkson. That's her newest title. And I am trying to really get a good reflection as I read, so I'm slowing down. That's the only thing I am currently reading right now. It's just her work, because I really want to give you guys an honest review on what I think of that one. As far as what we're reading with the kids, I have it narrowed down to 2 titles, and I need your help on this. So we are talking about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which seems to be, as I've looked at it, it seems to be little short stories here and there. I want to read that one because of our history. I'm not sure we're quite ready for it yet because of my daughter's reaction to Sword in the Stone. We might need a little bit more time before we go back to that. Our other choice is Word of Mouse, and it's about a little mouse who learns to speak up for himself. Now, part of my dilemma, I've narrowed it down to these 2 because we will do a Christmas book picture books in December. So I need something that is just going to last us November, and that's it. I want to be able to finish right after Thanksgiving. So leave me a comment down below. I need some advice. Which one do we go to next? Also leave me a comment down below and let me know what you're reading, what you're loving. I love hearing you guys' thoughts and the new books that you're discovering. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in November. Bye guys.